Hey, y'all. Welcome back. I've been reflecting this past week amidst a week of commencements and graduations. It's that time of year and that season after all. These reflections have kind of turned into a planting of seeds, I think, of this episode. And originally, I thought those reflections would be the blueprint for an article or perhaps an essay on Substack, but it feels more appropriate that they be spoken and shared in the same spirit of what brought them about in the first place, speaking at a commencement for the class of 2026. This was certainly an honor I never dreamed I would get to do until I did. So, I want to tell you a story that began some 31 years ago. It was April 19th, 1995, and I was standing on the second step, a marble step, outside the doors of Schaefer Hall on the Johns Hopkins University campus. My mom and I had just sat through the information session that high school students and their parents visiting a school would sit through on a beautiful spring day. And as the official student led tour was about to begin, I looked at my mom and I said, barely audibly, "This is where I'm going to go to school." Now, she did this double take and she shot me that look that only a mother can. You know, the one where she says, "Are you crazy? Don't say that out loud." Except she didn't have to say anything because, like all moms, her eyes did the talking. I think she pulled me by the arm at that point, slightly away from the crowd that started working its way toward the quad. And she asked, "How do you know?" She then followed up with, "You heard the average test scores students need to get in here, and you do not have those scores." She was right. I knew I didn't have the scores. And even still, something washed over me in that moment. It was this sense of knowing that a person waits for their whole life to experience and trust. And trust it, I did. I smiled and sort of retorted back to my mom, "I just know." And then, almost childlike, I skipped to catch up to the fading tour ahead. Now, there isn't much more I remember about that day traversing the campus. I didn't need to see landmarks or tour guides or hear history, to be honest. I just knew. I remember, though, the remainder of the day precisely because we were in the car driving back to Washington, D.C., when the news of the Oklahoma City bombing came over the radio airwaves. That was a core memory seated at that time. And now, 31 years later, after I began this journey of my knowing at the Johns Hopkins University, I was tapped to represent the university's alumni and personally welcome over 900 new master's graduates into a community 265,000 strong, and that I have the privilege of supporting in a board capacity. So, when I received the invite from the Dean of Arts and Sciences, I was certainly humbled and very honored. And still, I had no idea the effect this event would have on my spirit and my heart. And as I sit here now recording, I'm still processing it all a little bit after sitting on that stage with great minds and even wiser hearts. So you can probably imagine, with an event as anticipated as graduation, there's a lot of planning and rehearsal and preparation. Some could probably argue my rehearsal was 31 years long. I don't necessarily see it that way, but I guess I could feel that. My remarks were prepared, yes, in advance by an amazing team of professionals at the school. And when I received them, I glanced at them, but I didn't feel I needed to rehearse or study the words. I think it's because I felt like I wanted to put some space between me and a set of prepared remarks. As much as it's my tendency to overthink things, I didn't want to overthink this. And I definitely didn't want to be biased. By the morning of the event, I hadn't spent much time at all with my portion of the run of show. And I think a younger me would have practically memorized the words delivered from a podium. A wiser me, however, felt the need to meet those students in and from a different space, maybe from a heart space. And so as I went to prepare and don my regalia, I whispered to myself, just out of earshot of the dean and the masters of ceremonies, let them know you for your heart. And then my next exhale was even easier. I had no sensation of nerves. I had no butterflies. And it may have been a first for me. So then the master of ceremonies checked in with me one last time, asked, is it pronounced Kirst? I said yes, nodded, and smiled. So with that, we took our positions, tassels to the right, and I followed the leader. We walked through this crowd of 900 plus faces and hearts, each of them sharing this sense of euphoria and pride, and well earned too. I mean, it's no small achievement to get a degree from the 10th best university in the nation. The joy, as I can describe it now, was contagious. And I soaked it in with every pair of eyes that I met as I walked through and the length of the lacrosse field. The last time I walked the length of the field, right down the center, would have been about 26 years ago for a very different memory, not associated with commencement, and likely for another episode. So as I took my seat, second seat next to the dean, and I put my prepared binder in my lap, I saw that there was this sticky note indicating start here, showing me where in the program my remarks would begin. And I saw there was plenty of time before then, as I was the closing speaker. We certainly had at least a few hours to go. A faculty member behind me whispered in my ear, can I fix your hood a bit? And I obliged without turning my head too much because I knew that we were all on camera and being webcast around the world. And here I was sitting front row. So once that was sorted, I thanked her and I took in the show from my seat center stage. It was the first time I'd been on a stage like this for an event like this. And I made sure to take in the view and recognize the moment for all its magnitude. I was also one of the few non-faculty on that stage, and I was aware that that's not a regular occurrence, certainly not for me. So I treated it with regard. As I settled in, I didn't worry too much about the perfection of my gown, nor my tassel blowing in the wind. I was suddenly a student again. And this time I was learning from each of the students that sat before me on that field. We had some pleasant greetings, and then we had this heartfelt welcome from the dean as the main event began to take place. This was the calling of the names and the granting of degrees to over 900 students. And from the angle where I was sitting, it all felt like a very different experience as compared to my memory from 26 years ago when I sat among my anxious, crowded peers of students. And it made me think about my peers then. I was kind of wondering, where are they all now? Some I know, some I'm close with, and some I probably see regularly at reunion. But others I do wonder about. Would they remember the conversations that we even had as young people? Would they be attending their own child's commencement by now? I mean, some could be listening to this podcast and I may never know. Some could have been watching the webcast as I took stage and might never know they said, "Hey, I knew that guy back when." And perhaps even the students that were now crossing this stage in front of me with tears of joy, elation, and accomplishment in their eyes, perhaps I'd know them too. Maybe I would know them beyond the welcome speech, off the field, sort of alongside them in this shared call that we all have to elevate knowledge and echo worthiness and the livelihood in others. You see, the part of this experience that stayed with me the most was the witnessing. The witnessing those tears as they crossed that stage to shake hands and hold a diploma. Witnessing of the families in bleachers cheering for their loved one as if their life depended on it. And the witnessing of the pride in the eyes of the academics on all sides of me as their cohorts crossed the stage to begin a new stage in life. I felt a bit of anguish in that moment too for the professors because every year they must have this paradox of emotions, happy and sad. What a gift to bear witness. And everywhere I looked, there was this opportunity to bear witness. In the final procession, as we exited, I cheered for the students and the parents with fervor. All the pomp and circumstance was now making way for high fives and hugs, hats thrown, and sashes flying. As we settled back in the green room, I thanked my fellow speakers and, of course, the dean for the opportunity and acknowledged all the emotions I had just witnessed. I said, "I can't believe a number of you have to do this 3 to 4 more times this week." They all smiled and laughed and said this was one of the favorite parts of the job. I understood why. And with that, I walked back across the campus of the school that I wasn't supposed to get into academically 30 years ago. And I found myself pulled toward that second marble step leading to the doors of Schaefer Hall, where it all began. And there I thought of the 17-year-old kid who so rebelliously listened to an inner knowing and spoke a dream aloud. I'm going here. I then thought of my mom, who passed in 2020, and would love to have seen that moment her eldest son took the stage, welcoming in alumni of the class of 2026. I laughed a little through a few tears and said, just barely audibly, "And here I am, Mom. And here I am." If you ever get an opportunity or invite to speak at a commencement and address a body of graduates, take it. You will be glad you did. It brings healing and witnessing that will change you forever. Just ask Eric Church, the country singer whose commencement speech this year is one of the best I have seen and is making the rounds for all the right reasons this season. It's certainly worth a watch, a listen, and a lesson. So, to all the graduates of this class of 2026, wherever you are, I celebrate you with this episode, aptly titled Commencement and Change. And to all those who never gave up their dreams and listened to the whisper, even when it didn't make sense to others, thank you, and keep listening. This is how we change the world. Thanks for listening. Thanks for witnessing. Till next time.